I'm Alvin Daniels, lecturer in digital media in the Department of Communications at Chicago State University. I'm pleased to be here today with Tyra Whitney, a producer at News Nation, and Derrick Young, former traffic anchor for WBBM TV Channel 2. How are you all today?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm great.
Thank you all for coming. I'd like to do a little introduction. Tyra is a graduate of Norfolk State University, where she got her bachelor's in communication and master's degree in public relations. While in college, she helped implement a new segment for the university's TV station called Inventing Our History. She started her career at Wavy TV in Portsmouth, Virginia, as a part-time production operator. She now produces a 1 hour of a 3-hour primetime newscast and also produces packages with national appeal. Thank you for joining us, Tyra.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Mr. Derrick Young. Derrick is a graduate of the University of Illinois in Champaign. He is a former traffic anchor at WBBM TV Channel 2. Derrick Young is on a mission to create the best version of himself. Along the way, he shares lessons as a speaker, trainer, and financial advisor. The health club is his second home, and he addresses his need for speed by skydiving and driving fast cars. I want to remind Derrick, I won't be driving fast cars with you. I will wave at you. Thank you for coming, Derrick.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming and being on this panel, producing on deadline. And anyone who has ever been in my class will tell you that producing on deadline time is probably the most important entity that we have. And I stress that to my students from the very first day. So today we're going to be talking about just producing on deadline and what that means. My first question to both of you is, what was your motivation for going into the broadcast business? If you want to go, Tyra, and then Derrick.
Okay. My inspiration actually came from 9/11, from the DC area. And so I vividly remember that day, and I have family in New York, so we could not make phone calls. We literally had no idea of knowing where our family was, what was going on. So that was my first time seeing how news really does inform the public and how we get our information. And that's what started my passion for journalism and fueled my drive to get into news, was the 9/11 attacks.
Okay, thank you very much. Derrick, what was your motivation for getting into journalism when you first started?
When I first started, I just remember as a family, we watched the news as a family. So we had family dinner and we watched the news together. And it was important to my parents for us to stay informed and to be in touch with what was going on around us in our community and, outside of our community. And so news was embedded in me as something that you had to pay attention to and be involved with in order to know what's going on in the world around you.
Very good, very good. You bring up an interesting point that you and your family would sit around and watch the news. And we know that because of social media, et cetera, news comes from many different sources. So would you say, and I'm going to ask both of you, when you watch the news, did you feel like that news was true? Meaning quite often you have to check the facts now because it comes from many different places. But do you feel like back then it came from an authentic source, or you still had to check your sources?
Right. I think there was a more of an element of trust in it because of all of the people who played a role in putting it together. Whereas stuff that we see on the phones and on social media, there is really no system per se in order to validate the information. I will say, however, though, back then, my parents were always big on you also verifying as well, right? So even then, I think that was important, but now I think it's critically important for you to make sure that you check multiple sources before you assume that anything that you have read or heard is true.
Thank you. And I want to set some ground rules, as I know Tyra might be just a little bit younger than us, Derrick. There's no such thing as old. You're seasoned, vintage, or classic. So let's make that perfectly clear. So Tyra, how do you feel about that piece in terms of authentication? I know as a news producer, you've got to authenticate everything that comes past your desk. How do you feel about that?
I agree with Derrick. I think back then I too grew up in a news watching household, and I think that there was a level of you could trust what the news was telling you, but you still had to make sure that you were using some of your own common sense and some critical thinking to verify what was going on. Whereas now everybody is so, I think there's this more competitive nature to be the first to put something out that we're often skipping some of that verification needs to happen. And so a lot of times on social media, we'll see somebody share a story and then I'll click on it and it's not even from a reputable source. It's just somebody who did a blog post about their opinion on a news story, or they're not checking that dateline. It could be something that was from 2 years ago, and that causes a controversy. So I think that there's nowadays it's more important to verify those sources, dig a little bit deeper, and look into what information you're being presented to make sure you're giving the audience all the facts.
Thank you very much. And I can relate to that. In my practicum and media class, we study from the show Newsroom. And there it was a show on HBO. And there was an episode where they were trying to rush some news about someone dying to the anchor. And the anchor would not read it until it had been justified. So I totally agree that, you know, young people, you've got to really check and recheck everything that you get. Thank you.
Can I say one thing on that right quick?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Don't mind. And this plays in. So last week I get a video sent to me from a friend of mine, and it was a video that he didn't take the video. He didn't know who took the video. He didn't know where the video originated. But his question to me was, how do we get this to the news? And I'm like, why do we want to get this to the news? Right. Was it an interesting video? Yes, it was, but we didn't have any information on it. So I'm like, no, this is not necessarily newsworthy. So, you know, I say that to say that this is one of my peers thinking that something that he just randomly saw was newsworthy. And I think we always have to confirm.
Yeah, that's so true. Go ahead, Tyra, you want to interject?
It actually came up when we got the Chauvin verdict. And I remember when we first heard of George Floyd's death, it was, you know, a press release as, you know, a death when police responded to a mental health or a medical situation. And it was first reported that somebody had died while police were responding to this area for a medical crisis. And it wasn't until after that teenager put the video out that we saw that wasn't the case at all. And it picked up steam. So again, that's another instance of making sure that we're digging deeper and verifying the information that we're getting, especially when you're getting something that's just a media release from, you know, police departments or public officials. Yeah.
Thank you so very much. My next question, when thinking about producing on deadline, do you find that you have always been a timely person most of your life? Have you always been timely, or I knew you became more timely as you began your career, but were you timely as a teenager or growing up or in college?
Tyra?
No, I was not.
Thank you for your honesty.
I was not. I was in middle school and the first start of high school. I turned in projects late and I did not follow deadlines. And I didn't hone in on deadlines until college, when I had to turn in a video project by a certain date in a certain time. And I could not afford to fail that class because I needed all the scholarships I could get. So I really learned to have better time management in college, and then working in news these last few years has allowed me better time management skills in terms of producing a show and communication and things like that. But starting out, no.
And Derrick, before you answer that, I think that's key for our young people watching to realize you don't come out of the womb perfect, and you develop skills as you need to develop them, but you've got to develop them. So I'm grateful for your honesty. Go ahead, Derrick.
So for me, I would answer and say that I was always on time, but I wasn't always timely. So I always met the deadline, but oftentimes it was due to a cram. So right up to the deadline, I'm finishing something. I might even be starting and finishing something, right up to the deadline. What I learned in the news business is no, you need to separate it out and use all of the time that you have necessary and really plan things out. So the business taught me how to think more in segments and think more as it relates to, you know, how this whole story plays out, and make sure that you break it up into little chunks in order to make the final product nice.
Thank you so very much. Now, Tyra, you came, you spoke to my class, and I laugh because I tease you every time I see you, because there was something that you said about 10 minutes before time is on time is late, and after time don't even go. But you need to be there 10 minutes ahead of time to fix your edges or something like. Could you tell me what you told my class?
Yeah, I told your class when there's an interview or anything in life, not just within news, but if you're meeting somebody, be early. 15 minutes, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, don't show up. And having that extra time allows you to prepare yourself mentally, go, review that person that you're going to talk to remind yourself, look at the job that you're applying for to remind yourself of key points to hit on. But it also gives you that time as a woman to make sure your edges are nice, make sure your makeup looks good, check, you want to look presentable. And when you're late and then you're rushing, you look like you're rushing, and then you don't look presentable and clean. And then sometimes that can stray the person that you're talking to from listening to you because they're worried about your hair is looking a little crazy.
Okay. Thank you so very much. And we're starting to get questions. I just have 2 more questions that I want to ask, and then I'm going to open up the floor. This is a 2-parter. What is the biggest hindrance from getting your assignments in on deadline? What would you say the biggest hindrance in getting your assignment in on deadline? Derrick, if you want to start us out, like you doing traffic, what was the biggest hindrance to getting your story in on deadline?
Yeah, and I'll even step out even side of the traffic realm, because I did do a number of field reporting stories and things of that sort. And that's, to me, where it really was difficult. And I think the biggest thing for me, the thing that I learned was to tell the story before I wrote the story. So what I would do is I would just try to go and just literally write it all out and just allow myself, stream of consciousness to put the story down on paper and then adjust from there. Because what I did when I would try to write the story first is I would try to make this perfect story with all the right transitions and using all the right language, and I would just continue to get stuck. So my thing is, when there's a story in mind, I mean, something about it excites you, right? Something about it tells you that it's a story, and then explain that to yourself. Write it down such that you say, okay, this is why it's a story, this makes sense, and this is why it would be interesting to someone else. And then from there, you can figure out what are all the elements of the story. What pictures do I need? What video do I need? Who do I need to interview in order to bring all of this together?
Thank you very much. Tyra, same question. What is the biggest hindrance to getting something in on deadline?
When I'm producing a newscast and getting that show on air on time, it could be a matter of, major breaking news and I have to change my entire show. If I'm producing a package or a segment, it could be somebody else. Like it could be, I'm waiting on a certain type of video to come in. I'm waiting on a graphic to be made. And
okay, now, and I don't mean to cut you off, but you're hitting the meat of my class. Are you saying you have to depend on other people to get your job done?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
whether you like them or not, right?
Yeah. Whether you like them or not, whether they like you or not. Or, you could have had an argument with somebody the day before and they could still be mad about that. And so they could say, I'm gonna take my time getting this person their stuff because we had an argument. I'm still feeling mad about it. That can cause, that's usually the hindrance is you have to work together and you have to delegate. And then in that delegation, somebody might not work as fastly as you do. So you have to think about that. And that's why it's very important to know and learn the people that you're working with, because if I know it's 2:00 and I need something done by 4, I'm going to make sure I have the writer that I know can look at something, understand it and execute it quickly advise somebody who might need me to go sit down and talk with them about the story, tell them the angle and what we need. So.
Very good. I want to send a shout out to Sam Vaughn and to Brandon Hampton. I'm going to get to your questions in 1 minute, so just stick with me. Now, the second part to that question is, what is the biggest consequence for not having your assignment in on deadline? What is the biggest consequence? If you're doing a package, what is the biggest consequence for it not being on deadline? Tyra, if you want to start us out.
The biggest consequence for not having a package in on deadline is that it messes up somebody's show. You know, if I'm working with a correspondent and I'm producing their package and it's not ready for their hit time, we now have to change their show, which messes up that producer's timing. And if they're a producer who they like to go into their show under time, now they have a lot more time that they need to fill and they have to figure that out. Or we now have to change the element, and that can mess up that person's creativity or the way that that story is supposed to flow. That's one of the biggest consequences. The bigger consequences, if you keep doing it, you'll get fired.
I'm sorry, what was that you said? I want to start with an F.
The bigger consequence is if you keep missing your deadline, you'll be fired.
Oh my God, you nothing else has to be. So my students, they get tired of me saying be on time, and I'm trying to get it in their head that people are fired for not being on time. So thank you very much, Tyra. Derrick, what would you say if you want to add something to that consequence of not having your things in on time?
Yeah, I think Tyra stated it perfectly. I would add, your reputation is a tremendous, it's everything that you have, right? It is your brand. And I think that that's what we need to think about is, I am the Derrick Young brand, and everything that I do represents my brand. If I am dependable, beautiful. If I'm undependable, then I have an issue. So your reputation is a consequence. And as Tyra mentioned, so is your job. And I mean that seriously, because our business is all about hitting deadline. If you can't hit the deadline, no one cares about your creativity. They don't care about your storytelling ability. They don't care about how beautiful you are. So it is all about getting things done on time.
Come on now, let me make sure I got this right. Are you saying that an anchor or a reporter has not ran in, the news supposed to start at 10, and they come running in at 10:01 talking about the dog kept me longer or traffic was bad? I mean, that don't happen?
Yes, it absolutely happens. My first week on my job, it happened. It wasn't me. I was on time.
Yes, sir.
But an anchor ran into the studio literally with seconds to go before the broadcast started, and he didn't have a tie. And he's like, Derrick, do you have a second tie? I'm looking at him like, man, the director's counting down. Yeah. What do you mean, do I have another tie? And it became a huge issue. And it was funny, actually, because somebody got the word to the gentleman at the security desk. He pulled off his tie and brought it in and gave it to him. But the security people wear ties that are, that are offered by a company. And so it wasn't a full tie. So he had a tie that went up to maybe his third button on his shirt. And so he's sitting there closing his jacket lapel, trying not to show it. And it was a horrible day because he was late. He wasn't on time. He wasn't prepared. And we talk about that 10 years later. It is still one of the things we joke about the most.
Wow. Very good. Very good. I'm going to bring in a couple of questions before I ask my next question. Brandon Hampton asks, say that 20 times, asks, asks. Yeah, students, say that 20 times for me. Okay. What's been the biggest obstacle of your career as a journalist, and how did you overcome it? Tyra, if you want to start, what's been the biggest obstacle of your career as a journalist, and how did you overcome it?
Biggest obstacle of my career as a journalist, I think would have to be a few, kind of like now with everything going on with, News Nation and the bad press that we're getting. And I think the biggest obstacle is I'm finding myself questioning my next step as a producer, and how do I make this next step be beneficial to the longevity of my career and those goals. And so I overcame it I networked. Actually, I confided in a coworker that's a mentor to me, and I knew we could have an honest, transparent conversation. He gave me honest, transparent feedback, and then he said, contact this person, contact this person, contact this person. These are the people that you should be talking to that can help you. And in doing that, I was able to gain another mentor who's now helping me transition in my career and finding the right company, the right station, the right leadership. All those things are so important in your job, especially as journalists of color. You want to be under a company and under a newsroom that's going to foster that, for me, that I want is going to foster my growth. And so that's how I was able to overcome it.
Okay, thank you, Derrick.
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me to overcome was that I was untrained when I started in the business. I had never worked in news before. I did not study journalism or communication. I got my job through a contest, and they started me the day after they announced that I won the contest. And to me, the way that I was able to overcome it was, one, I found people who could help me, right? And I think that, you know, in there, it's all about professionalism, and it is not about getting along. It's about figuring out a way to professionally work with people, because you will need their support. The second thing was I had to learn the business. So I read books feverishly. I watched news like crazy, and I studied the news. A friend of mine would always say back in the day, you have to be a student of whatever game it is you're trying to play. And I became a student of the news game. And so to me, anyone who's interested in journalism right now, you need to be watching all types of news, and you need to watch it critically, right? And you need to watch it and observe what they're doing, what maybe they should be doing, and things of that sort, so that you understand all of the elements of the business.
Very good, very good. Let's bring a little levity joke to the conversation. And I'm gonna start it with this. Do you find that you are very careful when you talk to people about what you do? Because automatically they jump in and try and share stories or try and tell you what needs to happen. Case in point, when I was married, I went by my in-laws, and her father was like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, yeah, I'm in the television business, blah, blah, blah. He was like, hey, baby, we can get our TV fixed. I'm like, no, not that area of TV. So I say that to say, do you find that when you talk to people, you have to kind of think about how you introduce yourself as a journalist or as someone who works in this business?
I would say that, you know, because I had an on-camera role, I just had to deal with it, right? I mean, people knew, I mean, often cases, people knew what I did, and I had to just understand that that comes along with the business. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this notion of being professional within the work setting, you also have to be very professional outside of it, because people will watch or not watch based on how I treated them at the food bar at Whole Foods. And it happened so often that I would bump into someone, and maybe I'm in a hurry, maybe I'm just not interested, but I had to turn it on and be interested, because you don't, especially at this point in news, with all of the struggles that they're going through from a rating standpoint, you better keep every viewer you can keep. And it's all about treating people, you know, with kindness and respect.
Very good, very good. Derrick, he talked about how one of his colleagues called him with a video and was trying to get him to get it on the news. Tyra, do you find that a lot? People just call you and say, hey, I got a great story. And you'd be like, no. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I get that. I'll get emails or I'll get, messages like, hey, I've got this situation going on. I think I'm being wronged. I need you guys to investigate it. And I automatically will tell them, well, we don't investigate every single complaint that we get. And then I direct them to the investigative journalist or the investigative producer to get all the information that they need. And then I say, they'll discuss everything and make a decision about if it's a news story. And most of the people that have come to me are people who know me. So they know I'm going to be honest, and it's not to tell them like, oh, your problem isn't a problem, but it's just, I've explained to them that everything that happens is not necessarily news. In terms of explaining my job to people, It is a little bit trickier because I'm more behind the scenes and everybody doesn't understand what a producer does. And a lot of people may have an idea of what it is, and it's somewhere in the middle of what I do. So I have to try to explain it in the simplest terms so that way they understand it and I am able to articulate it better. But I haven't yet run into somebody where they've asked me what I do and I told them and they like scream at me. So that's the positive side of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Very good. So all of my students at Chicago State are my favorites, but there are favorites. And Andrew Brown, which is one of them, he builds computers. This cat he's a quiet guy, but he be doing it. He has a question. His question is, what was the most important what is the hardest part about being a journalist? What is the hardest part about being a journalist?
I would say, and I think Tyra just touched on it too, is understanding what is newsworthy and what isn't, right? Because again, just because something's interesting to me doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be newsworthy to the masses. And I think that's the piece. We have to take the emotion out of it and step away from something that may get you charged up and ask yourself, why is this interesting to this diverse body of people who are going to be watching? And if it is that, then how do I tell the story in the way that I make the connection with all of these people who come from so many different backgrounds and so many different experiences, and I need them all to be able to relate and connect to this one story.
Thank you very much, Derrick. Tyra, same question.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I also think turning off being a journalist is hard because we train our minds to think a certain way and dig deeper into something. So even if I'm sitting at home with my family and we're having a conversation, if something doesn't sound right, I'm instantly like, no, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. That's not the truth. That can't be the case. Because there's something missing in this piece. And now I have to find the missing element to make it make sense. And so yeah, that's probably the hard. And then like I have families looking at me like we were just having a conversation. We didn't need you to look this deeply. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but for my own peace of mind, I had to find this missing. Like, that's the hardest part, is turning it off.
Tyra for the win. She's so right.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, one of the things that I do when we talk about objective journalism is in one of my classes, we look at an issue and I push the students to look at it from not only the position that they like, but the position that they don't like. So let's say abortion. You might not believe in abortion, but you might have to report on abortion. So my question is, what is the most difficult news story to cover? Like something like they come at you with this, it really doesn't, it doesn't resonate in your spirit. But like you say, you got to cut that emotion off. What has been the most difficult news story to cover?
For me, it'll be, police brutality against Black people of color, in particular Black men, because I have an older brother and I have nephews, and it's just something that pulls at me as a woman to see those videos. And I actually just talked to a high school class earlier this week about the fact that I've actually sat and watched so many videos this year of just these consistent issues and these situations, and it's like there's nothing being done. And then we have to turn around and cover the Capitol insurrection, and then there's this whole dialogue of, well, we have to use this verbiage, and I'm the one lone person going, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna call them a rioter because it was declared a riot, and I'm gonna stand firm in that belief, not because I'm a Black woman and not because of the situation, but because we have to look, as a journalist, I have to look and say, the police declared this a riot. I'm going to call them rioters. Now, if you show me video of somebody across the street from the Capitol just holding up their little flag or their little sign, I'll call them a protester. But we don't have that video yet. So I'm going to use the correct terminology, because I never want to, with any story that we ever cover, I never want to mince words or downplay one side and play up the other side. I always want to make sure that we're being honest and true and transparent in what we're saying and showing. So, but yeah, definitely police brutality, race related stories. Yeah.
Okay, and Derrick, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know when you were covering traffic, and let's say that was a horrific accident, I'm sure that had to be delicate to deal with when you're talking about traffic. But you tell me, what is the most difficult news story that you've had to cover?
Yeah, so honestly, so that would be it. I never forget the first day they sent me out to do a live report on Lakeshore Drive, right at Roosevelt Road, and it was a fatality. A gentleman driving at a very high rate of speed hit another car, multiple people died, and the emotion of it was just, I mean, to see this mangled car and to see, you know, the workers still trying to undo the mangled mess of the car, and to be on camera reporting on this, knowing good and well that someone is dead there. So to me, that was one of the toughest things that I had to do, because you have to find a way to keep your cool, right? You have to find a way to not think about, wow, what if that could have been a friend or a family member of my own, and I'm reporting on their death, and you want to make sure that you report things accurately. You want to make sure that you report things in a way that shows respect to the family. The other thing that I've seen often, though, is murder, right? Because the reporters oftentimes have to then go and put a microphone in the face of someone whose family member just got killed.
Mhm.
And how do you do that, right? I mean, how do you, because often we hear family people saying, you know, give us our space and respect us, but the reporter is the person who has to step over that line and put the microphone in their face, because that's the story
That's
that people want
because
to
in
hear.
your ear they're saying go find a person who's with the family, and you got to do it whether you want to do it or not.
Period.
Mhm.
Wow, wow. Okay, that question was from Lisa Sisson. Thank you. I'm coming to a few more questions, but before I do, I want to ask, because there's got to be balance, and I see Derrick likes high-speed cars, brother. How did you get into that piece? Is that relaxation for you, or what? How did that happen?
You know, I've always been the kid, man. I mean, I had a little four-wheeler when I was a kid, and I terrorized the neighborhood hood riding up and down the street. So I've always liked that kind of stuff. And this is, to me, the beauty of life and how life comes together for all of us, right? In that when I get this job at CBS, who would have guessed that this job opportunity would give me the opportunity to fly in the air and water show with the Thunderbirds, to jump from a plane over Lakeshore Drive with the Army Golden Knights during the air and water show, to drive Lamborghini cars, because I'm the traffic guy, I'm the experienced guy, and I was the fool really who would do all of this kind of stuff, and nobody else wanted to do it. So I don't know where it came from, but the job gave me the opportunity to fulfill so many of those desires.
Very good, Tyra. You skydiving? I mean, is that what you do just to blow off steam, skydive?
I haven't yet, but I was supposed to do a tandem skydive last year, but the pandemic kind of canceled that out. So still on the top of my list.
See, when I grow up, I want to be just like y'all. Okay, I will. Hey, come on down. You're looking good, but I ain't doing that. Okay, so Tyra, since you don't skydive, what do you do to relax? What's a hobby of yours?
Main hobby of mine is I cook. I'll have friends over and we'll have like little dinner parties and things like that. And I'll cook food. That's probably like the main thing that I do to relax, because the time that it takes to put a meal together, from the planning, the prep, the execution, it's slower. So that's that one time when I can actually slow down and focus on something and have it come out the way I want it to come out. So yeah, I'll cook.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, Professor Miles, I'm trying to get to your question. Let's go to Derrick Lyons. His question was, what was the most important interview decision you said or did to get the job? What was the most important interview decision you said or did to get the job? If you all understand that question. I know, Derrick, you said you got your job through a contest, but like, what was a big decision you had to make in getting that job?
So yes, I did win a contest, and a lot of that had to do on them interviewing me, finding out more about me, what my interests were, and all of that, because they wanted it to be a good story too. And honestly, the reason why I got this job, I believe, is because of my willingness to give back. When people bump into me on the street, oftentimes they say to me, "Oh, you're the teacher who got the job as a reporter." And technically, I was not a teacher. I'm not smart enough to be a teacher. I was a mentor. I worked in schools. I did mentoring programs. So I was in school all the time. And so the video that they used of me in order to compare me to the other contestants was that of students who I had mentored, talking about the impact that I had on their life. So who would have thought, again, that, giving back would have given so much. So to me, what you want to show is just how well-rounded a person you are, and that life to you is about more than just you and your interests. It's about other people and giving to them as well.
Thank you, Derrick. Tyra, same question. Interview decision. What comes to mind to you?
I think the main decision I have when interviewing to make is if I'm willing to move away and go travel somewhere else. I think that's the biggest decision that I have to make. And I'm always willing to travel, move somewhere else. I mean, you can always go back home. That's the beauty of this business. You can always find your way back, but definitely really sitting down and thinking, like, could I be able to live away from my family for an extended period of time? Yes. And yes. And then in terms of getting the interview, I know something that has set me apart and has made people want to give me an interview is the fact that the level of initiative that I have. Like, they've always, applauded on the fact that I was in grad school, but also working and doing other things to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do to get my first job. And so I think that, everybody looking to apply for jobs in this field should think about what's something that resonates with the job, but it will set me apart from somebody else that would make somebody look at me and want to take that first chance, because you only need one person to say yes to give you your first job. So, yeah.
Now that's interesting you say that, because we're watching the NFL draft last night, and I felt adulation for the gentleman getting chosen. And I think when your dream is fulfilled, that is just so, emotion comes. Can you describe your emotion when you got your first job? Like, man, after going to school 4 years, I got this job. What was your emotion when you got that first job?
When I got my first job, I was excited. I think I screamed, actually. Like, I think I was like, "Can I scream?" And he was like, "Yeah," and I screamed. And that was because I was just kind of like, I was like, I don't want to move back home with my mom. I did not just spend 4 years in undergrad to live at home and do nothing with my degree. And so when I got that job, and I was so excited. And then when I got my first producing job, I actually got that offer on the spot. And I cried because I had been interviewing for months and
I'm
kept
sorry,
getting
how long had you been interviewing?
months. Like, I actually started sending out my resume in February of that year, and I didn't get an offer until April. Like, 2 weeks before I was going to graduate is when I got my first producing job.
And the reason why I'm interjecting there is that quite often young people think, hey, as soon as I get out of college, the job they're gonna knock on my door job. No, it don't happen that way. It can, but 9 times out of 10, you got to pay your dues like you did. Thank you, Tyra. Derrick, what was your emotion when you got your first job working in the industry?
I was equally elated and overwhelmed, honestly. So, I mean, yes, you feel great, right? But to me, getting the job, I've learned in my life experience, is the easy piece. Keeping the job and doing a great job is the hard part. And that's where the work really kicks in. And I knew, because I had no experience in that business. I knew that I'd never been in a studio with robotic cameras moving around. I knew that I had never been in a situation where I had to keep my cool and give a news report while 20 other people are literally 5 feet away from me talking, screaming or whatever's going on, that I had a lot of work to do. So to me, the big thing is making sure that once you get that job, that you're ready to do any and every, not any, because clearly you have to maintain your ethics and your values, but to put in the effort in order to keep that job and do a great job.
Very good. Thank you all so very much. Now it's time to say goodbye. No, I'm not going to say. We're running out of time. I apologize to the people who sent in some great questions. And again, I'm sure we'll do this again at another time. I just want to say that The conference program is at www.csu.edu/CMAT/evening events. I'm sorry. And for high school teacher professional development credit info, go to www.csu.edu/CMAT teacher PD credits. Say that 5 times. Again, I want to thank my panelists on behalf of everyone at Chicago State University. Thank you, Tyra Whitney and Derrick Young, for joining us today. Your professionalism is impeccable, but your down-to-earthness is even greater. And I can't say that enough, because quite often people reach the next level and they just don't, they lose the common touch. So I can say that Derrick is a friend of mine. He's always had the common touch. Tyra, when she came to speak to my class, she spoke to them. She didn't speak above them. And that's what young people need to know, that people, as you achieve things, reach back down. Can you speak to that? Reaching back down to help somebody up. Quickly, if you could just say, you said you do that quite a bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do it quite a bit. I think it's important because I feel like I'm where I am today because I had other people reaching back to help me, and I wouldn't be a good person if I didn't reach back to want to help somebody else get to where they want to go to. So absolutely.
Derrick?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I always believe that volunteerism is just an incredible thing. I think that, you know, the world is bigger than us, and it's bigger than what we just get. So, and if all you focus on what you get is you become a taker, if you focus on what you can give, then it balances things out. So I think that every young person needs to have some organization that they're volunteering with and giving back to.
Thank you very much. I'm dating myself, classic. I don't know if you all watched the Apollo. I don't want Sandman to come out. So I want to remind our audience that Chicago State University will be returning to full face-to-face classes in the fall. For registration and all other information, go to www.csu.edu for details. You can reuse this Zoom link to access today's panels. Please go to csu.edu/CMAT and click events to view the complete conference lineup. Our next panel will be Black Screenwriters Craft the Stories. It begins at 2 p.m. and will be moderated by the illustrious lecturer, Christine Houston. If you are a teacher applying to receive professional development credits for attending one of our 4 K through 12 accredited panels, please use the link in the chat to receive more information, or go to csu.edu/CMAT and click on events. To access the conference tomorrow, please use the new link that will appear in your email tomorrow. Thank you to everyone for joining us.